In addition to making my own videos whenever I can get around to it, I enjoy watching other people's drum videos. And one of the channels I was watching was Sounds Like a Drum, and they showed up with something that looked an awful lot like this. This thing is my own build. It's based on a design by a French company called Asba, which is pronounced
Alfred Simon Boudard Accessoires.
And they made an 8x14 drum like this for John J.R. Robinson, who's probably the most recorded drummer on earth this side of Hal Blaine. And they made it in such a way that he could select the number of tensioners that he wanted on each side of the drum. Check this out. With a normal snare drum, you're kind of stuck with having the number of lugs that you're going to have on the drum and having them positioned where they're going to be positioned. And because of the kind of counter hoops that are available, you're limited to whatever you can get on the market. So in the case of this drum, it's an 8-lug 13-inch drum, which is about standard. Now, for a drum that size, you can get hoops with either 6 or 8-lug configurations on them. If a 10-lug exists, I've never heard of it. With this drum, I actually do have it set up with 10 lugs per side, as though it were a 14, even though the smaller diameter actually makes it easier for this extra hardware to get this up into a nice, tight, crispy position a lot easier. Now, I can go up to 12 per side, and how it operates is you have this little sort of double claw hook affair, which you can put on the side of the drum. Where's my drum key? Tighten it down, and voila, I've just added an 11th tuner to this side of the drum. Now, of course, that's ridiculous and asymmetrical, and when you're dealing with a snare drum, asymmetry is the enemy. Mostly because you have snares stretched across the bottom of it, and they are going to demand a specific kind of symmetry. I'm sure there's a way you could set up an odd number of tuning points around this drum, but it's kind of pointless and unnecessary. Some might argue that this very drum itself is pointless and unnecessary. However, I have found that the number of tuning points you have on each side of the drum actually does affect the tuning and the sound. So, for example, if I take 4 lugs off of each side of this drum, taking it down to 6 lugs per side, and of course, if I wanted to make this drum just like kind of my normie snare drum right here, then of course I could take a couple of lugs off of each side, just have 8, and it's actually set up to kind of assist you in putting 8 lugs on the drum. So let's go a little bit into how I built this thing. As you can see, this drum doesn't have any individual tension casings on it. It just has this master ring. Now, I didn't have a custom 13-inch ring made for me. I went out and ordered a 4.5mm no flange steel drum hoop plated in chrome. And that's a thick boy, but they do make, from Drum Factory Direct, where I got most of these parts, they make a little, like a claw, that easily fits that single flange, or that no flange hoop. And I had to do a little bit of drilling to expand the opening in this little claw hook in order to pass a 1024 lug insert through there. And then the lug insert is held in place with a little rubber O-ring. Now, the only thing this doesn't have is a good means of resisting any twist locking. So when I threaded these things together, I made sure to use white lithium grease so that there is zero resistance on these things. And then by the time you do start put some tension on them, friction should take over and allow you to just tune and adjust things with the drum key without having to clamp onto this in any meaningful way. Now, if you do need to get in there, you can kind of wedge a little flat screwdriver in there just to kind of lock the insert nut into place, and that will allow you to either free the bolt or undo it. And if you're really in an emergency, take a Sawzall and cut the tension rod and start over. You can save the rest of the parts. But anyway, that's how I put this together. And then the top side of things are these, what are called double flanged hoops, and they don't have any tabs around them. So they're designed to be used with these little cast claw hooks. And you can actually use this particular system on any drum. They make them in, I think, every size except maybe 11 inches. So that's what I used for the top and the bottom. They make snare side hoops as well, so that's good to know. And so yeah, I made 24 of these tensioner combos that I can use 12 on the bottom and 12 on the top if I really want to max it out. And I recorded some with the drum tuned that way, and my is it crispy. Now, as far as setting this thing up, because you don't have any kind of, because you don't have the rigidity of having those lugs already measured and placed properly around the drum shell, what I did was when I mounted this main ring on here, I actually did it based on the placement of the snare strainer and the snares. Since those had to be in the middle of the drum and symmetrical, that kind of gave me a point of reference. And so I actually mounted the ring in 8 places around the shell using little washers to make sure everything is spaced and tight. So there's no rattling, there's no moving, that's not warping the shell or distorting it in any meaningful way. And what it does, because there's now 8 measured points around the drum, that gives you a reference point that if you start with the bottom head, because you're referencing everything off of the snare strainer and mechanism anyway. So if you reference the bottom head and you want to do an 8 lug 13 per normal, you mount your tensioners in between those mounting points, just kind of by eyeball. You get it pretty much in the middle and it'll be mostly correct. Believe me, it won't hurt the sound of the drum any. Then once you have that into place, then it's not that difficult. Okay, I like the logo on my drum head to be where the front of the drum is going to be, and I want my butt plate to be at the front of the drum so that I have access to the actual strainer here. I don't have to reach over the drum for that. And then on this one, you can kind of pick your poison. I prefer to do an offset to the right. So I'm going to have to lean over the drum for this. So I place it just a slight offset to the right. It's almost like the 7/8 offset that you'd get on like an Orange County drum kit or something like that. Just get a couple of them on there, just get a little tension on. And then go around and start adding them in the same way. And what I do is I'll actually clip the top of the drum first and hold the bottom claw hook just to kind of guide it into place, and it makes it easier to kind of just drop it over that hoop, that bottom tension ring rather. Kind of get things, and there is still, you still got to align it by eyeball somewhat, so that's why if you got to do any serious messing with this drum, better to do it at the workbench than here at home. Now, right away we have an opportunity here. We only have 4 lugs on the top of this drum. Let's see how it sounds. And they're not tuned very tightly. I mean, that's sloppy. So let's get a proper 8 lugs on here and see how she sounds. Another thing to watch out for is, because of the kind of, boy, I'm really close to that microphone, aren't I? Because of the kind of strainer I used, honestly, with this design, it would be better to use like a DW mini mag or something like that, something that would drop out and away from, because with this lever having to clear through this area right here, it does restrict where I can place the top lugs around this drum kit. So just something to think about if you have any designs on building your own crazy creature like this. You know, note to ASBA, if anybody from there is watching, it would be really cool if you guys did the top lug snare drum in 7x13. Alright, so now we got 8 lugs on this thing. That's a little better. I'm sure my vocal mic is just loving this. Alright, so then minus the snares. So that's the basics and the mechanics of how this drum works. Now, of course, there's no need to restrict ourselves. Sure, we do have a combination of forces going on here. Of course, if we only counted on the 8 little 1024 screws that are holding this steel ring onto the shell, the amount of tension we could put against that would be somewhat limited. However, it is assisted to some degree by the amount of force being applied in the downward direction in order to secure the bottom head. So, it doesn't have to be a symmetrical configuration around the drum, either from side to side or top to bottom. Now, I don't know why you would want to put like 5 lugs on one side and 4 on the other. I mean, And I mean down the center of the drum, 5 over here and 4 over here. I don't know how that would make any sense. I'm sure there's a studio drummer or engineer who could probably school me correct on that one. I don't personally see it. However, I didn't personally see the benefits of making a snare drum like this either until I saw the top lug snare that Asba made. So, who's to say? Maybe we can all learn something from this experience. But I haven't tried this one yet. And that is putting 16 on the top. And 8 on the bottom. Oh man, this is gonna be tight. Hopefully I'm not gonna break something right here on camera. God, that would be embarrassing. I'm kind of pissed off too because I put a lot of work into this thing. I have no idea. And the metal works alone just to make this thing happen. Does the snare still work? Yeah. So now I have 16 lugs on the top of the head. Let's see what this sounds like. I gotta confess, it's not materially much different from how it sounded with 12 lugs per side, but it sure does look badass, and it's a neat way to store all the extra bits of hardware you've got there, provided you can keep the tension equalized between them on either side. Maybe I need to make sure. I'm gonna ruin my reputation as a human torque wrench if I don't get this one right. Someday I'll do some videos about how I tune drums, and a lot of it is done as much through how the drum key feels, to me anyway, as it is by sound. That's pretty crispy. So anyway, this is my new snare drum build. I think it's, because of its sound and versatility, I mean the shell construction is the same as my DW 7x13. It's a 10-ply maple shell with 6-ply reinforcing rings. I gave it a nice little turquoise stain color and hit it with a nice clear coat. And didn't put too much into the finish, because as soon as I saw that Asba snare and realized what it would take to turn this drum into something like that, I immediately switched gears on what I was going to do with this shell. So, one little note about this, Asba likes to, at least on the top lug, in one of the badges they have a tiny little red, white, and blue ribbon that's, kind of like to represent the French tricolor flag. And so when I got the Grosgrain to do the snare ribbons here, I went with a nice similar red, white, and blue theme to kind of give it a nod towards that original Asba drum, to the country where they're made, and all of that happiness right there. Kind of incorporate a little bit of that into this drum. So that's the way I chose to do that. But I think this thing probably supplants even my DW Collector Series snare as my favorite drum, at least for the moment. If it starts to give me any grief or it makes itself a pain when I'm out trying to play gigs, then it will probably get demoted. But until then, and it's not just because it's a new toy, it's because this thing sounds really good, it performs really good, it's really versatile. The only real criticism I have, and yeah, it is my own work, so how many criticisms do you think I have? You'd be surprised, is that I still haven't come up with some kind of retention mechanism to keep that lug insert from swiveling without the assistance of a small screwdriver or something like that when you're tuning or tightening or loosening these tensioners from around the drum. And it will be a matter of time to see how strong this support ring is versus the rest of the hardware on there, just how much pressure you can put on this thing. I'd probably have to make a second prototype and absolutely abuse the thing until I broke something in order to find that out. Don't know that I'm ready to do that quite yet. But I do have quite a little snare drum here, and so I thought I might share that with all the rest of you. Anyway, I'm Mike Lindsay. Thanks for coming out. we're pausing while I have a moment to think about the things I'm going to say. Oh shit, I forgot where I was going with it. We'll use that as the marker right there. Gigantic roaring belch.